Yanis Varoufakis, thanks for joining me on UpFront. The biggest financial crisis of our lifetimes took place in 2008. The big banks discredited, the neoliberal order in chaos. You'd think this would be the moment for the left to be dominant, and yet almost a decade later, it's the right that's dominant, from the UK to the US to across parts of Europe. Why has the left failed so miserably in its response to the crash?
For two reasons. The first one is the left lost its moral compass a long time ago and never managed to recover from the crimes of the Soviet Union and from the collapse of the socialist states in 1991. The second reason, of course, is, remember 1929? 1929 was that period's 2008. And what happened immediately after that? A hapless liberal establishment failed to manage global capitalism, and instead of the left rising up, the deflationary forces that were unleashed bred political monsters from the right, very similar to what we have now.
You're now calling for a European New Deal to be launched, involving large-scale green investment, employment guarantees, an anti-poverty fund. But where's the strategy to make it happen? You're not the first to call for stuff like this, are you? The left is great at diagnoses, at seminars, even at protests, but it isn't great at getting results, at getting stuff done, at implementing its ideas, is it?
Well, there is a profound difference between our European New Deal proposals as DiEM25 and what the left has been doing. By the way, I am a left-winger, but the movement that I belong to, that I've helped set up, the Democracy in Europe movement, is not a left-wing movement. It's a broad alliance of progressives, of commonsensical people who want to share a platform for restoring a modicum of rationality and humanism in Europe. It's not pie-in-the-sky material. We're not saying that first we need to have a revolution, change the constitution, have a completely different kind of world, another world is possible, and then everything is going to be okay. No, we're not saying that. We are putting forward very specific proposals on what to do with bank regulation, what to do about the management of public debt that has run away from us, how to deal with poverty that could be applied tomorrow morning without any huge ideological sea change, simply by means of existing institutions doing the right thing.
You, as a left-wing economist with, some would say, radical inclinations, got the chance not just to theorize solutions or propose solutions, you got a chance to exercise actual power. You were finance minister of Greece for 5 months in 2015 at the height of the debt crisis, and yet your tenure was a disaster, wasn't it?
Well, allow me to say that you should not confuse power with office. I had the office. I had the Ministry of Finance. I had no power. My country has been bankrupt, well, truly and deeply bankrupt since 2010. And all that I tried to do was to use the office that the Greek people elected me to in order to go to the creditors of our bankrupt state and put forward to them a mutually beneficial agreement, an agreement that would allow us to grow out of our crisis, out of our depression, so as to be able to look after our people and also to repay more money to the creditors. That tenure, as you said, well, more or less, as you said, ended up in failure. But why? Because the creditors did not really want their money back. They were only interested in crashing our government, making sure that there would be no such mutually advantageous agreement. Why? Only because they wanted to use this crashing of our government, of the Greek Spring, of the Athens Spring, as a morality tale by which to frighten, to scare Spaniards, Irish, Italian, and ultimately French voters from getting ideas that they can elect a government that will contest the powers of the Troika.
Many would agree with that analysis of yours, and the so-called Troika, the IMF, the EU Commission, the European Central Bank, do have a lot to answer for when it comes to the Greek debt crisis. There's no doubt they were pretty destructive. You called it fiscal waterboarding. But did you also undermine yourself by antagonizing your fellow finance ministers so much, saying you welcome their hatred on Twitter, comparing the Eurozone to a sinking Titanic?
Not in the slightest, because we have to get the timing right. You quoted a tweet that I'm very proud of after our government was crushed. When I first went to the Eurogroup, to Brussels, to Berlin, to Frankfurt. I went there saying to them that I'm here in order to strike a mutually advantageous agreement with you. I'm not here to pontificate, I'm not here to tell you what is right, but I'm here to tell you that what we've been doing so far in Greece has been a dismal failure. We do not have the monopoly of the truth as to what should happen in Greece, but nor do you. Let's sit down and find common ground. This is how I went to them. The program I put to them, to my colleagues in the Eurogroup, was moderate, down the road. There was nothing left-wing about it. It was common sense, and they chose to ignore it.
Those are fair points, and I've already conceded them in a sense in saying that the Troika has a lot to answer for on the ideological front. What I asked you was about your own personal strategy. You make a fair point about the tweet, but of course the Titanic comparison came hours before you became finance minister. Surely you wouldn't dispute the New York Times description of you as his personal style was blunt. He disregarded the bloodless etiquette of European politicians who saw you as a, quote, hothead.
It's not true. I really dispute it. Firstly, there was no Titanic comment before I was elected. There was a Titanic comment which was completely and utterly correct and vindicated by history, which I made in 2010.
No, you said on Channel 4 News on January 2015, 26th of January, I think days before you became finance minister, the day before, you said the people are in third class, as in the Titanic, starting to feel the drowning effects first. You did make a comparison of the Eurozone with the Titanic.
I must have made more than one such comparison, but let me defend this point. What I was saying was that the Eurozone was a vessel in deep trouble. We were heading in the wrong direction, and was I not confirmed by the facts? Yes, we were. And the point I made about the third class, and the second class, and the first class passengers was that it is idiotic when the vessel is heading for the rocks, or for the iceberg, or for whatever, for the passengers of the third class, I was implying Greece, to be having it out with the passengers of the first class, because in the end we were all going to sink together. That was not antagonizing the German government, it was exactly the opposite. It was to say to them, we are in this together.
Some on the left, both inside and outside of Greece, have argued that you could have negotiated more effectively if you'd drawn up a detailed plan for exiting the single currency, a task you failed to undertake.
Well, you know what the most amusing part of it is, that I am constantly being criticized both for failing to draw up a plan for getting Greece out of the Eurozone and for drawing up a plan to get Greece out of the Eurozone.
And which is a fairer description in your view?
Both of them are unfair. Let me put it very succinctly for you. I had a plan. I had a plan for managing Grexit, an imposed eviction of Greece from the Eurozone. I had this plan even before I was minister. I was working on it. And indeed, I can assure you that there is a high treason charge in the Greek parliament tabled by some deluded people because I had this plan, and I admit to it. I'm guilty as charged. I had this plan. At the same time, it was never my policy to get Greece out of the euro. You see, I'm a very staunch critic of the euro, but I do believe that there is a fundamental difference between saying we should not have gotten into the euro, I still believe that, and saying that we should get out of the euro. My view was very simple. Let me just spell it out for you. We should negotiate very hard for a viable agreement within the Eurozone. That was my objective, and therefore I never threatened anyone with Grexit. But if functionaries in Brussels, Frankfurt and Berlin threatened me with Grexit if I did not sign up on a dotted line of an extend and pretend non-viable loan agreement, then I would say to them, push us out, and I'm ready for it. I think this is a pretty straightforward position, isn't it?
And the Greek crisis is far from over today, of course. Prime Minister Tsipras now faces a choice between agreeing to additionally imposed external austerity or calling for fresh elections. I want to read to you a quote from one Greek economist who said recently, we could be looking at potentially disastrous political turmoil, which could bring back the scenario of Grexit with a vengeance. Grexit, Greek exit from the European Union. Does that worry you? Is that on the cards?
It never went away. It's not going to come back. It never went away. Let me put it this way. Ever since we accepted the first bailout loan in 2010, Greece became unsustainable, fully and totally unsustainable. All we've been doing since 2010 is we have been, getting a new credit card to pay off the previous credit card. Everybody knows that this can't end well. Everyone knows that. A 10-year-old could tell you that. My tenure had the purpose of ending this. Tsipras, my prime minister, capitulated, and we continue along those lines. Wolfgang Schäuble, the German finance minister, who is the only person in the Eurogroup that actually has a plan. I disagree with his plan, but he's the only one with a plan. Has a very simple plan, and that is for Greece to get out of the Eurozone. He disagrees with his chancellor, Chancellor Merkel. This disagreement is the main reason why we're in limbo. We are neither in the Eurozone nor out of the Eurozone. So as long as we are in that unsustainable limbo, the uncertainty will be very, very high.
Will Greece be a member of the Eurozone and or the European Union in a year or 2 years' time, in your view?
I think that this is the wrong question, allow me to say. The right question is there going to be a Eurozone and the European Union
and your answer?
in 1 or 2 years' time? Remember,
and your answer
Greece
to that
is
question?
not that important. Well, the way we're going, I cannot see Italy remaining in the Eurozone for very long. You see, when you allow an epidemic to start spreading from a place like Greece to Spain, to Italy, to Ireland, then eventually it gets to a place like Italy. Do you realize that now, as we speak, only one political party in Italy wants to keep Italy in the Eurozone? Greece, I insist on this, Greece should not be important. The only reason why we keep talking about Greece is because it is symptomatic of the architectural design faults and crisis of the Eurozone. This is what we should be focusing on.
Yanis Varoufakis, thanks for joining me on UpFront.
Thank you very much.